dietitian from Highland Primary Care, and this class I'm about to present is sleep, and it's approximately 35 minutes long. Hopefully it doesn't put you to sleep, or maybe that's what we want. I hope you enjoy. Take care.
As always, none of our classes are meant to be replacements for good medical care. Just a reminder within the Highland Primary Care Network from Airdrie out to Didsbury that you do have your nurse and social worker at your medical home or doctor's office, and the doctor there as well, who can help you if you need some individual information. But yeah, this is just some good general information. We don't focus on medications at all in this class. These are just the things we like to consider before they even get to thinking about medication. So the natural things that we can control before we start thinking down that line. At this point, I usually do show a video from Russell Foster, and it is quite good, and we'll include the link at the end, and at your leisure you can take it in. It's not very long. I particularly like the section between about 5 and 8 minutes when he talks about why we sleep. But just to give you a condensed version of what he talks about there, he talks a little bit about how the brain can only get rid of its waste when we're sleeping, because it actually uses the same pathways that it uses to nourish itself to get rid of waste. And there's a really fascinating section of research being done right now on, if the buildup of some of those wastes occurs, what is the impact on the brain? And it's rather interesting. So that's an important thing that happens when we sleep. Certain of our pathways are only turned on while we're sleeping. So things like for our metabolism and for just restorative, we need our sleep for those pathways to be turned on. Memory consolidation for sure is much, much better when we've had a good night's sleep, but not just memory consolidation, also our ability to find new solutions to complex problems is so much better after we've slept well. So it's really, I know we tend to have a sleep when we're dead type culture, but it's really important to make sleep a priority. Importance of sleep. So as I said before, alluded to, that people who are interested in this class usually know how important it is to get a good night's sleep. I know how bad I feel after just one bad night's sleep, and if I've had a few in a row, I'm really not myself. So if you've had a chronic sleeping problem, you know how important a good night's sleep is. How much sleep do we need? A lot of times in class, people will often throw out the number 7 to 8 hours. They need 7 to 8 hours of sleep. But what the research would actually say is that some people need a little bit more and some people need a little bit less. What I found so interesting from the Russell Foster video is that we spend a third of our lives sleeping. This is no big surprise, but if you live to be 90, you've actually spent 30 years of your life sleeping. So I just thought that was a really interesting way to put it. How do we know if we're getting enough sleep then? If the average is 7 to 8, but some people need more and some people need less. How we know if we're getting enough sleep is if we can wake up either with our alarm or maybe before our alarm, if we're not relying on caffeine, if we're not falling asleep at our desk during the day. Basically, how you're feeling is a good indication that you're either getting enough sleep or perhaps that you're not getting enough sleep. Oh, this is a pretty complex infographic. You don't need to know it all for sure. The only thing I wanted to pull out here is that sleep does happen in stages, that we go through these 5 stages. We go through them actually 5 or 6 times a night. So it takes about 90 minutes to go through a cycle. The interesting thing is that the average adult wakes up about 15 to 20 times a night. So if you do wake up in the night, I just want you to know that that's actually normal. So we have periods of more wakefulness and more rest restfulness in the night, because a lot of people will think if they're waking up at night that it's a problem, and that's actually really normal. What might be a problem is if our brain starts going and we start thinking, and we're going to talk about that because that's, of course, so important. But just know that waking up at night on its own is not abnormal. So with sleep, there's lots of factors that we can't control. So things like chronic pain or restless leg syndrome. If we're snoring, we may be able, there may be a few things that our doctor or medical home team can suggest around that. But for the most part, we can actually control whether we snore or not. Also, if we have any mental health issues, again, we can seek some help for these things, but they may be impacting our sleep and we might not be able to control them at this moment. So just a reminder that if medical conditions are affecting the way you sleep, touch base with your medical home, with your doctor or your healthcare team there, and they can give you some more individual advice. And the other thing we can't control is if we work shifts, and the research would say that approximately 60% of people that work shifts have experienced troubles with their sleep. I would say it's actually probably a little higher than that from my experience, but it does create a mismatch between their natural biological clock and their sleep-wake cycle. So often we can't control what our shifts are, or especially if we work sort of opposite to everybody else, and it's really hard to get a good night's sleep when we're functioning against our natural biological rhythms of being awake when it's light and being sleeping when it's dark. So that's a tricky one that often requires some more support. I can't say this enough because I know some people are doing all the right things. A lot of people are doing all the right things and they just don't sleep well and they feel frustrated. So this class is really not to put any more stress on people, but just to give you some little tips and guidelines of things that might help if you haven't already tried them. And they're things that our patients have told us that have helped them. So they are tried and true. And hopefully, if you haven't tried them, they might be something to give a whirl and have a gentle curiosity with and see if they can help at all. So good sleep habits. Really going to try to keep this very short and succinct for you. And just a reminder, if you need more information about these things or more support, again, you've got your medical home team that can help you with that. But so just some things to consider. Maybe you can take a look into your own, just take a quick inventory of your own habits right now. So things that will help us with sleep. And again, if you're a shift worker, this may not be under your control, but getting some adequate exposure to natural light during the day can be really helpful. Really discouraging people from napping during the day. And if they are going to nap, that they take a short 20 to 30-minute nap in the morning, that they not nap afternoon, because that again starts interrupting the sleep cycle at night and then it becomes a bad cycle. Really encourage people to set the same wake up and bedtime. And the funny thing is that if people have started into a bad cycle of not sleeping well, they will keep going to bed earlier and earlier. And that seems intuitive. That seems to make sense. But sometimes what's happening is we're just lying there awake for longer. So on some occasions, the experts will recommend actually staying up a little longer. So if you usually go to bed at 10, maybe staying up to 11 so that you're really, really tired when you go to bed. And yes, you may not be getting anywhere near 7 hours. Maybe at first you're only getting 4 or 5 hours, but it's a lot better than staying up all night. And then shortly, in short intervals, moving that time back. So, from 11 to 10:45 to 10:30, for example. And the thing to keep in mind is if you have ever taken care of a child or know somebody who has a child and taking care of them, uh, think about what we do for kids. We don't just usually go from a busy activity and throw them into bed. We have some kind of pre-bed routine. So it may include a bath, definitely brushing our teeth or a book. There's something to signal them that things are slowing down and getting calmer. And there's every indication that that works really well for adults too. So think about that. Do you just go, 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 go and jump into bed and then boing, think about all the things that have gone on during the day? Or could you create sort of, even if it means staying up a little bit longer, a pre-bed routine that's more calming, where you can keep the lights dim? That used to be one thing I would always do, is go into the bathroom and turn on all the lights, and they are quite bright in my bathroom. And now we just have a little night light. So try to keep the lights a little bit dimmer. Just the body does like patterns. And if the body gets to know, oh, okay, this is the time of day where we're going to sleep, it will try to help you. Try to avoid clock watching. I know this is really difficult, um, but this little kitten here who says my bed is a magical place where I suddenly remember everything I was supposed to do. This is what we really want to avoid. We don't want your bed to become the place that you go to worry. So if you're not sleeping within 15 to 20 minutes, you may want to consider getting up and doing your pre-bed routine again. So whatever that was, maybe you brush your teeth, read a book, whatever that was, or something that's just not very stimulating. So maybe you have a craft that you do, like knitting or something that isn't mentally stimulating, but could just give you something to do. It's not the time to get up and clean the whole house or anything like that. We just want to get you tired again, so that you can go back to sleep. The other thing that little tip that I've heard that I think is really, really helpful, is just the knowing that sometimes a good rest can be almost as restorative as a good night's sleep. So if you're just lying there, closing your eyes, get relaxed and comfortable, and if you can just tell yourself that a good night's rest is almost as restorative as a good night's sleep, you can think to yourself, nobody's asking anything of me right now. How often does that happen in life? And just enjoy that feeling of nobody asking anything of you, that rest is just as good, almost just as good as a night's sleep. I know a lot of people who've used this technique and have actually calmed themselves down enough that they were able to fall asleep. So those are two tools for your toolkit to try. So either the telling yourself it's just as good as a nice rest is just as good as a night's sleep, or getting up that 15 to 20 minutes and repeating your bedtime routine. Those are things to try. So, and just some things to think about too. How is your mattress? Is it supporting you well? Are you going to bed? Are you comfortable? That's really important. And also, is there somebody in the bed who might be disturbing you? This could be children or your partner, if they're a snorer, perhaps, or do you have animals like puppies or dog in your bed? Are they disturbing you? And just how much are you able to change around that? So just a little caution here. The stimulants like caffeine and nicotine can really affect our sleep quality and our sleep cycles. So just be really, really careful with that. And again, if this isn't an issue for you, then it's not an issue. So if you're the kind of person who can have a cup of coffee after dinner and still sleep great and wake up the next day and feel amazing, then it's not an issue. But for a lot of people, when we're tired, we're using caffeine, and then it's affecting the way we sleep. A lot of people will say to me that they use nicotine to calm down and they feel like it's relaxing and calming them down. But the truth is, it is a stimulant. The relaxing feeling that some people, so quote unquote, relaxing feeling that some people get is just the going away of the withdrawal symptoms that are happening. So just something to be wary of. I know some people have tried things like no coffee after noontime or going to decaf. And of course, it's not just coffee. There's also caffeine in tea and some in pop and some in chocolate, depending on the kinds you have. So just be careful with caffeine. If you are having difficulty sleeping, it's definitely worth cutting back and think about that just noticeable difference. So if you have 4 cups of coffee, can you change one of those cups to half a cup? Can you have a glass of water? Maybe you're thirsty. Maybe that would help keep you awake too. Maybe you just need a little bit more hydration. Um, yeah, so just think about small little changes there. You don't have to go from drinking 4 cups of coffee to 1 cup of coffee, just slow little changes. Maybe if you always have a cup of coffee after dinner, maybe you try to have it after work. You know what, if you could have it a bit earlier, and see if it doesn't make any small change in the way you sleep. And the last one there, alcohol isn't a stimulant, but it is a sedative. And I don't know how many times I've heard people say they have a glass of wine to get them to go to sleep. I think it's pretty well known that it speeds the onset of sleep, but it really does disrupt sleep when the body starts to metabolize the alcohol, and it's well known to harm the process of that memory consolidation and our memory recall. It's funny, that's where I got tripped up. But it does not improve your sleep at all. So, something, if you do always have a drink before bed, maybe try backing it off, have it after dinner or having a smaller amount, and see if it helps your sleep at all. And just a caution about screens before bed, the blue screen in particular is well known to be have the same effect on the brain as being outside. So it's blocking the melatonin production, which we want during the day. We want to be wakeful, but at night we actually want that melatonin production, natural melatonin production, and it helps us go to sleep. So when we have our screens before bed, we are blocking that melatonin production and keeping ourselves more wakeful. So the research would say to not have screens 2 hours before bed. I would say to a lot of people that I've spoken with, that might be very unrealistic, but maybe they could back them off, 15 minutes before bed or half an hour, starting there and seeing if it helps their sleep at all. Activity. I can't stress enough the importance of regular physical activity or just movement. Movement might be the better word to use. So this doesn't mean you have to hit the gym for a certain amount of time. A nice walk after dinner can be really nice. Anything that just gets the body moving a little bit. So if you like to be outside, if you like to garden, maybe close the blinds and dance around, just a little bit of movement can really help us with sleep. Of course, I like the idea of being outside because of that's going to increase your exposure to natural light. But any movement that we can build into our day, that's especially if it's fun and something we like to do, or if it's really small, so just taking the stairs a couple of times, that can be really helpful. And can just help us with our sleep. And when we get more sleep, then we feel more energy, then we're more likely to take care of ourselves. So I really think it can be quite helpful. And people who are regularly physically active do spend more time in those deep restorative sleep the parts of those cycles that are deep and restorative. So they do tend to wake feeling more rested. And moving on to sleep and thoughts. And I would say this comes up more than anything else with our participants in the HIP program as being one of the biggest considerations or the biggest impacts on their sleep. So it's true, often our worries and thinking can keep us up at night. And recall when I said, you're dead tired, but you go to bed and you boing awake and start worrying about things. This you've basically primed your brain. You've told it, this is where I go to worry. So we want to get out of that habit. And then this little comic is just really funny. It's difficult to sleep because of all the math involved. And I don't know anyone who hasn't done this at some point, doing the math, if it's a certain time of the night and how much time do I have if my alarm goes off at this time. So just think of some errors in our thinking or negative ways of thinking which might be impacting your sleep. And we won't go into this as much as we do in the full class, but give you a few strategies that might help. And then, the option to connect with your medical home. So worry thinking, by and large, is the biggest thinking error that we hear people talk about in regards to sleep. And actually, all the thinking errors are very similar. But some people do worry just out of habit. And what we want to remind people is the brain human nature tends to like to live in the future. Unfortunately, what the brain will give us or forecast is the worst possible outcome from our certain circumstances that we're in. And we really want to be careful because even though it seems really real because it's in our brain, we are just making it up. So you might want to just take a moment just to notice how, well, even to look back in life and think about how many times you've worried about things that have never come to pass. Or if that's too hard to come to, maybe you can picture somebody who's worried a lot in your life and how many times they worry about something that has never come to pass and how much energy and time and truly our health is wasted because we have worried about something. So, and then also using that to move forward, just realizing, wow, I'm just making this up. That's a possibility of something that might happen, but it's really not probable. And also just recognizing that, my track record getting through tough times is 100% so far. So if I need to get through something, I will approach it at that time. There's no point in making myself sick about it at this present moment when I don't even know if it's going to be a problem. So that worry does, though, create that state of mental alertness, gets the body into a stress response. We can keep ourselves up all night this way. This little saying here, worry, worry, it's like a rocking chair. It keeps you busy, but it doesn't get you anywhere. I have used this very often when I find myself in a worry thinking mode. It just catches me. I picture the rocking chair and it just stops me, even gives me that moment just to get a bit of perspective. So if that's something, it's just a tool for the toolkit. Maybe you have something else that you like to say to yourself, but this was one thing that really helped me. Strategies for worried thinking. So you want to think containment about all of these things. So sometimes it's just acknowledging that we're going to worry. So we just want to limit the amount of time that we're doing that. The first strategy is challenging your worried thinking, which sounds a little strange maybe, but it's just playing the game. What's the worst that can happen? And sometimes just saying it out loud, if you say it with another person, we realize there's a lot of things that we're just making up. Or sometimes we could write it down and then we can challenge it and say, well, that's possible, but is it probable? No, it's not likely to happen. And also just recognizing that we have a lot of strength and resilience, like we've gotten this far. One of the quotes is, my track record of getting through hard times is 100%, right? I really like like my odds moving forward. So that's something you can tell yourself as well. So if something's going to come up, we're going to be able to address it and deal with it at that time. There's really no point in trying to figure out a problem before it's even occurred. So those are the kind of things we want to do, challenging our thinking. I put the little picture of the worry dolls because it's a strategy used for kids, which is similar to the strategies for adults. So the idea behind it is that the person would tell their worries to the doll and then put the doll away in the sleeping bag for the night. And the worry box, the worry journal, and even scheduling a time to worry are very similar in their thinking about containing that worry. Knowing that getting a good night's sleep is probably the best thing we can do when we have a problem we need to solve or a challenge we need to overcome. And so this is going to help us if we practice this habit of putting our worries away. If we get a better night's sleep, we might be much more apt to be able to problem solve in a better way the next day. So the worry box, very similar, is just that you would write down your worries and then put them in the box and put it away for the night. The worry journal is very similar, although you could use it at different times of the day. Whenever you have something, you might jot it down. I have heard people say too that they've kept a journal by their bed, and when something upset them at night, like, oh, I have to do that, they just jotted it down. And for some people, that's helpful. So some of these you have to have a playful curiosity with and try, and see if they are helpful for you or not. There's a few different ways to use the worry journal. But that's a couple of different ways that I've heard people have had success. So the last one, scheduling a time to worry, is kind of funny because I just had said to you that, there's no point in worrying. But again, think that containment. So instead of worrying all day about something, I'm going to pick a time. Hopefully it's a time where there's going to be a cutoff point so that I don't spiral. We don't spiral when we're doing this and get really ourselves all worked up about it. But if we know at 8 o'clock our favorite show is coming on TV and maybe we choose to do our worrying at say 7:30. So it's from 7:30 to 8, and then at 8 we're going to put all those worries away and move on to our favorite show or something that we're doing, or we're going outside for a walk or something else. But yeah, so scheduling a time to worry, again, you might use your worry journal here and just write down all the worries you have. Sometimes you can see from that, like, oh, this is something I can act on right now. I can make this appointment at the bank. Or maybe there's things that you can kind of sort out. These are under my control and these are not under my control. And that can be a really helpful practice too when it comes to writing things out in your worry journal. So that's the idea, is just acknowledging that we probably aren't going to get, if we've had a lifetime habit of worrying, it's probably not going to go away all of a sudden. So we just want to try to put some containment around it. So there's some tools for your toolkit for some things to try. Sometimes it's good to have more than one thing because some things work in certain situations and not in others. So give them a try and see how they work for you. So thoughts do become things. This is a thing I would always say to myself, but truly thoughts are just thoughts, and they can be changed. So with some practice, and I do acknowledge it takes some practice because we're actually not taught to be aware of what we're thinking, generally speaking. We're not really noticing what's going on. It's just our brain is projecting something and we accept it as our reality. When we bring our awareness to our thinking, we can get some perspective. We can start to notice, oh, yeah, I'm just really making that all up. And just because I have a thought doesn't mean that it's true. And starting to challenge and push back with this, changing some of our inaccurate and unrealistic thinking, maybe shifting it to more accurate and realistic thoughts. And if you're struggling with this at all, you may want to think about, if your best friend was behaving the way that you are and thinking the way that you are, what would you tell them? What would be the advice you would you would offer them. And the reason I say this is because sometimes we just need a little bit of perspective. We just need to stand outside ourselves, and we have a difficult time doing this. So if we almost picture another person, it can be more helpful, just to get a little bit of perspective. And often I think we have all fallen into this trap of feeling like we saw exactly what our friend should do with a problem, and we were frustrated that they didn't follow through on it. It's very clear when you can step back a little bit. Often there's some clarity around what somebody should do, but because we're very immersed in our thoughts and our thinking and take it as reality sometimes, it's our path through whatever we're going through isn't always as clear. Relaxation can be a really powerful tool, um, to be really proactive. So if we engage in regular relaxation type activities, so it could be, you could call it meditation, you could call it relaxation, you could call it guided meditation, you could call it imagery. You might do progressive muscle relaxation, which we'll talk about next, or breathing. Any of these types of activities will help engage the part of the brain that's a better problem solver. And so when you do have a challenge or a problem to overcome, that part of the brain will be more likely to be engaged. So these things that seem so small, people have told me, how can they possibly help if we practice them on a regular basis? And again, we don't have to be religious about it, but practicing them on a regular basis, they can really help us when we need them. So this is sometimes I don't use the word meditation. I like the word relaxation, because I feel like if I use the word meditation to 10 different people, they'll have 10 different ideas about what that means. But all I mean by it is it a chance for us to have um, a moment to notice what's going on in our brains and what we're thinking about. So I prefer the word relaxation in class, and that's just why, just because of all the different connotations or things that might be going on in your brain when I say different words. The idea behind relaxing the brain, you might focus on a word or your breath. So that's often, and as soon as we're focusing on one thing, we typically will slow down the amount of thoughts that are running through the brain. They do say we can have as many as 50,000, 60,000 thoughts a day, which is a lot. So just slowing down, focusing on our breathing, focusing on that word. Yes, the mind will wander. That's what it does. It's good at that. It's great at solving problems, and it likes to solve problems. We just want to notice what's coming in, what thoughts are coming in. And then maybe we start to sort them. Which thoughts are more helpful? Which thoughts might not be serving me? And can I let that go? Can I put my attention into those thoughts that are more helpful? It's just noticing what's going on up there. So deep breathing goes right along with what we were talking about, relaxation. And there's lots of different ways to do deep breathing. And I always get a kick out of something that John Kabat-Zinn says. And he was, I think you'd consider him a guru. He kind of brought mindfulness to Western medicine. And he always laughs at, he has an 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction course, and it's pretty intense. Um, and he asked people what the best thing they took away from the course is, and people inevitably say the breathing. And he, like, it's pretty funny because we've all been breathing our whole lives, and I think, you know, you're an expert in it. But yeah, there are some techniques that can help us to elicit that relaxation response. And often, if we're used to breathing just in our chest or our throats, it can be actually, if they induce that in the lab, that they can actually induce anxiety. So we want to do a deeper breath from the belly. And that can be as simple as just trying to get the belly inflating and deflating on the exhale. So it doesn't have to look like any certain thing. If you're not really sure how to do it, sometimes I'll tell people to take one hand to their chest and one hand to their belly, and then just kind of notice what's happening there. I often find when people bring their awareness to their breathing that they start to change it and they start to breathe a little deeper. So We will provide the link to 478 breathing and the Dr. Wheel video. It's quite good as well, and 478 has some interesting research in the Western world, I'd say. But I would say any breathing that you engage in that sort of gets you to take a deeper breath is really beneficial to the to the brain and to the nervous system. And heart-centered breathing is something we do in the heart math class. And that's something you could look into a little more if you'd like to. Oh, progressive muscle relaxation. So usually we would watch a video at this stage in class, but I'm going to provide the link to a nice 6-minute progressive muscle relaxation. Maybe you could use it before bed and give it a try and see if it will help with sleep. The idea behind progressive muscle relaxation, I usually start at the feet and work my way up to the top of the head, and you're just contracting and releasing muscles, and you pay a lot of attention to that released feeling. It's great if you do have some pain that you're struggling with or challenged with, because often when we're in pain, we will tighten different parts of our body, and we can actually be contributing to that. So when we do progressive muscle relaxation with that active contraction, and the letting go, then we're letting go of a lot of that tension we're holding on to. And before bed, this can be a very nice practice to try, and it might help you relax and fall asleep. These sleep diaries, we will make sure we have this resource under the sleep class on our website. So you can go there, and this one's really complicated, so I'll probably put a simpler one there. Sometimes for people just tracking a little bit what's going on with their sleep, again, bringing more awareness to our habits can help us to change them. A quick mention about SMART goals, because I like to put a little bit about SMART goals in every class. SMART is just an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, achievable, rewarding, and timely. So as it pertains to sleep, we might say starting Saturday, 5 days a week, I will have no screens. Ooh, 2 hours, that's a big one. Maybe 15 minutes before bedtime might be more realistic. So 2 hours is what the academics would say would be best for us. But if we watch TV till 11 o'clock at night and go directly to bed, could we turn it off at 10:30 and do something else for half an hour? Have a playful curiosity about, does that help my sleep at all? Do I feel any better? Am I sleeping a little deeper maybe? So it doesn't have to be 2 hours. Think about that just noticeable difference. So just a small change. Sometimes those small changes added up make a big, big difference. And that brings us to the end. So our very condensed sleep class with, I hope, the best parts chosen for you. I thank you so much for joining me, and I hope that you keep safe and well. Okay, take care. I'm Kathy, the dietitian from Highland Primary Care.